What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So later on today, we do have a new games showcase to look forward to from Nintendo, and obviously this has sent the internet into speculation, guessing as to what could be there, and well, that one big title came up again. We'll go over all of that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about more controversy that's hit Xbox, with one of Microsoft's own first-party studios releasing a game that actually runs worse on the Xbox compared to the PlayStation 5. And we'll also be talking about Dead Island 2. It's out this week, and reviews went live yesterday. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button. Helps that a ton. And if new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. We're going to start today with new Xbox Game Pass games for the closeout of April and kicking off the month of May. We can see this posted up over on news.xbox.com. They have the card at the top that shows all of the different games, and there's one in particular that I'm very curious about, and I was happy to see it get announced for Game Pass, but available now. It actually went live yesterday, Minecraft Legends. That's cloud, console, and PC. Moving up to April 20th, we have Coffee Talk Episode 2, cloud, console, and PC. We also have Medieval Dynasty. That says Xbox One, and it's available now on PC and Xbox Series, so I think it's coming to Xbox One later, according to them. Homestead, that's April 21st, cloud, PC, and Xbox Series S and X. We have on April 26th, Cassette Beast, that's on PC. Blaze Blue Cross Tag Battle Special Edition, heading to cloud, console, and PC on April 27th, with The Last Case of Benedict Fox, console and PC. This is the one I'm interested in here. It's described as a Lovecraftian Metroidvania. We've seen it before, and we've also had gameplay released for it, and it looks kind of interesting, definitely unique. I will say that. So I'll be checking that one out April 27th as soon as it drops. And then obviously the big one being Redfall, cloud, PC, and Xbox Series X and S, May 2nd. This had plenty of controversy on its own because of that 30 FPS quality mode that will only be available at launch for consoles. But Arcane typically releases good titles, so I'm curious to see how this turns out from a content and game side as opposed to just the frame rate that's been discussed. Obviously, you can also go over to PC if you want the 60 FPS, which should be fairly attainable based on some of the specifications for like the minimum requirements that they've released, but otherwise, checking out Redfall and the Lovecraftian Metroidvania. So pretty good way to close out the month of April and get started with May for Game Pass. Also tomorrow, there's another showcase to look forward to. This coming from Ubisoft, and it's mostly targeted at fans of The Division. We can see this post up over on Twitter from The Division Twitter account saying clear your calendar for April 20th because we're about to take you on a journey through the past, present, and future of the Division franchise, which they have a card here going over the 3 different titles that'll be present. This, of course, for Division Day. The Division 2, there's Year 5 roadmap, which it's actually pretty impressive. This game has been going on for 5 years, but hey, people seem to like The Division 2. It's a game I tried out here and there, but I never really got into it. But still, we'll see some more information on that one with the new Descent game mode. The Division Heartland, that's the gameplay preview. To my understanding, Division Heartland is the free-to-play game they're going to do kind of in the Division universe, that being for consoles and PC, whereas the Division Resurgence is a project update that is going to be kind of the Division for mobile devices, still keeping that same gameplay style and all of that within the Division universe. But certainly a lot to look forward there for Division fans. Make sure you check that one out tomorrow. Oh, and we did have a new firmware drop for the Switch, 16.0.2. And if you never guess what it does, we can see this over on Nintendo's customer service website detailing the update to be general system stability improvements to enhance the user's experience. The kickstand gets probably the most updates out of anything on the Switch. And to look a bit further into it, Oatmeal Dome mostly mentions that there's not a lot there. I think they did some work on the bad word list, and that was kind of it. So there you go. If you haven't already, go ahead and update your Switch to 16.0.2. That way it has a harder time falling over. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Nintendo and their games showcase that's happening later on today. And that's an Indie World presentation. These showcases in particular are pretty interesting because you never really know what you're going to see. And a lot of times it's creative, we'll say, because I understand sometimes that I'll see the chat for these different showcases and people go, okay, this is kind of boring. But genuinely, there's some very creative and unique ideas that are presented here, and sometimes you find an absolute gem. Well, we can see this posted up over on Twitter from Nintendo with the announcement, where they say, join us tomorrow, April 19th, 9 a.m. Pacific, for a new Indie World showcase. Tune in for roughly 20 minutes of reveals, announcements, and updates on indie games for Nintendo Switch. I think it's very important, the updates part, as any new games that are shown here, very hard to guess those, but updates maybe on games that are already announced and we're looking for release dates, that's probably the easier thing to at least take a shot in the dark at. For example, a lot of people are talking about Hollow Knight Silksong. Why wouldn't they? It comes up every single indie showcase since it was revealed years ago with Team Cherry. And there was some movement with Hollow Knight Silksong after Microsoft Rewards popped up with a link to the page the other day. So people kind of thinking, okay, Hollow Knight Silksong was at that Xbox presentation that mentioned all these games would be out in the next year. Although we're seeing games not really stick to that anyway, but Hollow Knight Silksong going to Game Pass, it seems, and then also fitting within that 12-month window. Maybe it gets a release date here, or even better, maybe it just shadow drops. Okay, that might be pushing it a little bit, but that's the cool thing about these Indie World showcases is there typically are shadow drops there. It's exciting stuff, especially if there's a game that you see for the first time, maybe just presented out of the blue, looks great, and then, oh yeah, I can pick it up later on today. That's an awesome feeling to see that. Otherwise, though, something like Vampire Survivors makes a lot of sense for that to go to the Switch. It not a graphically intensive game, obviously, and it really exploded online when it was on PC through Steam, and then obviously when it went to Xbox, got another big push in marketing and excitement, and yeah, sure, why not? Get it on the Switch where there's a massive audience who I think would get a kick out of it. Oh, and just for fun, let's get a release date for Bomb Rush Cyberpunk. In fact, Bomb Rush Cyberpunk, I think, is a great candidate for a shadow drop. Sure, maybe it's because we're hearing about things like Jet Set Radio, with apparently Sega doing some work in the background, presenting that at different pitches and investor briefings, but why not? You definitely need more Jet Set Radio-like games out there, and this one has been kind of sitting at the release year of 2023 for a little while now. Maybe it's time to finally get that release date, and I've also seen people talk about something like Pizza Tower. That comes up a lot. I haven't played it yet, but people keep asking me to check it out. Hey, maybe it'll shadow drop here during the Indie World presentation, and I can check it out there on the Switch, sure. But hey, shadow drop everything, right? Otherwise, I'm just expecting some, like I said, unique and creative titles here during the Indie World Showcase, and just kind of cross my fingers and hoping that it's finally time to get that Hollow Knight Silksong release date. I guess we'll find out later today. Next up, let's talk about some video game sales data that's been released, and it's kind of playing into the idea that Sony is seeing an absolute massive first quarter. In fact, there's a good chance that the first quarter here of 2023 does indeed end up being like the biggest quarter recorded for a video game company, and that's sort of been kind of pitched and alluded to here and there for the PlayStation 5. But take a look. We can see this posted up by Christopher Dring over on Twitter, saying across the whole of Europe, console and PC game sales were down 11% for the first quarter of the year, but console sales were up 41%. Console success was down to PS5, with sales up 369% year on year. This offsets declines from Switch, which was down 18%, and Xbox Series S and X down 10%. Which is odd. I mean, the PS5, look, we know it's selling well. It's trends consistently on social media, and you see people buying and talking about that system a lot. And obviously pairing with something like Hogwarts Legacy was a really good idea from a marketing perspective, and certainly outweighed kind of the dud that ended up being Forspoken with that marketing deal. But the fact that the Xbox Series S and X appears to be trending downwards a bit there in Europe, down 10% year over year, is a little concerning. I don't really think the stock issues are as prevalent as they were even a year ago. So you figure things would be trending in the opposite direction. And because more stock is getting out there, that people would be buying these systems, as we see with the PlayStation 5. But slightly concerning there for Xbox. Although we figure as games start getting out there, especially something like Starfield, it's going to have the Xbox logo all over that. And then maybe with Forza and the eventual purchase of Activision Blizzard, with Call of Duty being a massive cornerstone for that, could work to turn things around, but certainly not the statistics Microsoft and the sales data we're looking to have put out there for the Xbox Series. Oh, and as for the Switch being down 18%, I mean, yeah, it's getting a bit older now, and a lot of people have a Switch. So Nintendo themselves have mentioned they're kind of working to try to sell people their second and third Switch for the household. And that was one of their big strategies, was to make the Switch a multi-system household device. So you have them kind of laying all over the place. That was part of the Switch Lite strategy there. And for the most part, it's worked. The Switch does continue to sell very, very well for a system that has now entered its 7th year on the market. But hey, the PS5 up over 360%. It seems like Sony is at least getting back on track to try to overtake the PlayStation 4 as they go along, especially through the next couple of years with what we assume to be some big time releases coming up. Next up, let's talk about Xbox once again, which it's been a rough week and a half to 2 weeks for Microsoft, especially all the Redfall stuff, but there has actually been a trend when it comes to comparisons with performance of these games between the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series. Because on paper, especially when you look at things like the teraflop count, you figure a lot of these games would run better on the Xbox Series X versus the PlayStation 5, but the opposite seems to be happening with a lot of frame rate analysis showing that things are running better, or at least smoother, on the PlayStation 5. And at times, even just the resolution is higher, ray tracing performance being better. And the latest example really set the internet off because it's from a Microsoft first-party studio with Tango Gameworks. Take a look this over on Eurogamer. And this is alongside of the Digital Foundry video that went up that went over Ghostwire Tokyo, which has recently released on the Xbox a year after the PlayStation 5 version released for Ghostwire Tokyo. And I had played this on the PS5 when it came out, and there were quite a few performance, graphical modes, all these different things. And the biggest thing I noticed was the input latency, but it didn't like break the game or anything. I was still able to go through it. And I think the title itself had more concerning issues when it comes to the overall structure of the game, some of the tedium to it. Otherwise, though, very unique title. I mean, really, when it comes to the combat and stuff, definitely stood out. But as they were going through and doing these comparisons, it was very, very strange, very telling. I mean, like the different modes they listed here when it comes to the resolution. I mean, look, you're going to see some of these numbers, and most people wouldn't necessarily be able to tell the difference between 1620p and 1512p. Really, come on. But when you look at some of the things with frame rate comparisons, it looks like the Xbox at times 10 to 15% less than the PS5. You have screen tearing, although I noticed that on the PlayStation version as well. You definitely want a TV that can support some of the different modes that'll cut down on that with things like VRR. However, it's a very odd thing that's transpired here, at least in the early part of this generation, because it's not just Ghostwire Tokyo, it's other games. However, people would be able to chalk that up to, oh, the PlayStation 5, as we are seeing with sales, it just has more people playing it right now because they have sold so many more systems. And that's kind of the trend and trajectory that they're on now. So developers who are planning 4 or even 5 years from now are probably going to start developing primarily for the PS5 and taking advantage of that, or at least set that as their baseline, and then move over and take a look at the Xbox Series. At least that's kind of been the reasoning. But now, with a first-party studio from Microsoft, Tango Gameworks, coming in with less than expected in terms of performance for the Xbox Series, where we kind of figured they would take the year to really smooth things out and even take advantage of some of the benefits of the Xbox Series X, the 12 teraflop device, not really turning in the performance we were figuring they would. So very odd situation here. And I mean, I guess as we go through the generation and we see things like a Fable, like this new Forza game, definitely that being a big one, Perfect Dark, a new game from the Coalition who's very good with Unreal Engine and taking advantage of that hardware, we would see the Xbox Series stretch its legs a bit more. It just hasn't really been a good run for it so far to start the generation. But I guess we'll see as we go along and Microsoft gets some of these bigger first-party titles out there. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Dead Island 2. It is out this Friday, and I'm going to be checking it out. I liked Dead Island way back in the day. I played it on the Xbox 360, and to be honest, I didn't think Dead Island 2 would ever come out, but here we are after, over a decade of it being in development, being passed around between different publishers and companies. It's finally a thing, and it's here, and we have the Metacritic score, which you can see this posted up, sitting now at a 75 with 60 critic reviews. That's about where I thought it would be. I mentioned I was thinking a 76 on this one, so it could still go up to that number. But looking through several of the reviews, you can see the split 36 positive, 24 mixed. And based on the way this is being described, it feels like it's going to be more of a kind of a shallow arcadey game as opposed to being an incredibly deep RPG. So I guess if you go into it with curbed expectations as to what you're going to see here, and also apparently the length of the game, which some are mentioning is like 20 hours or so, you could probably have a really good time with it. Like we can see VGC says the best games ask important questions in the case of Dead Island 2. That question is, do you think it's funny to chop zombies into bits? If the answer is yes, then Dead Island 2 is a joy. And then on the opposite side of the review scale at a 60, Noisy Pixel says the high asking price and frustratingly unbalanced gameplay prevent me from recommending this as a day one purchase, but I have confidence it will find its bearing among its zombie slaying fans someday. So I understand it still falls into that $70 price point that for people, you look at it, you go, okay, well, maybe I'll wait for this one. And Dead Island 2 is a game that I could see being half off not too far down the road, maybe a month or two. You might see it getting marked down pretty heavily, especially because there are a lot of bigger games coming out here very, very soon that will probably take a lot of focus off of it. And when that happens, you tend to see some of the publishers start to mark these down, and even retailers on their own, just to kind of offload some of the stock. So if you're kind of on the fence for it and you're like, I don't know, there's a lot of stuff coming up, maybe come back to Dead Island 2 later on in the year, because it does, at least from the outside right now looking in, appear to be a very fun arcadey experience, and the flesh system is interesting enough for me to check out for the podcast, which I'm sure we'll be going over this a bit more then. But yeah, Dead Island 2 coming in about where I expected with that Metacritic score of 75. And before we go to the comment of the day, we're going to take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, will Hollow Knight Silksong be part of the Indie World Showcase tomorrow? Oh, 68% say no. Not a lot of confidence here. 32% say yes. You know what? I think it's time we get that Hollow Knight Silksong release date. You know what? Even better, just go ahead and release it now. Why not? Get a lot of hype. I'm sure a lot of sales will happen immediately, and it should be in Game Pass day one. That would be a big time moment to close the presentation with. So I'm crossing my fingers and hoping that we finally see Hollow Knight Silksong get that release date. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from JFK TV saying, for some reason, I have close to zero hype for whatever Netflix chooses to do in gaming industry, stating or not, and I'm not anywhere near a Netflix hater or anything like that. Well, I think it makes sense that most people are going to be skeptical of Netflix attempting a big-time AAA blockbuster multi-platform game that's a new original IP. A lot of it's going to come down to them bringing the right talent together to create that game, because as long as they're willing to have it in development long enough and fund it correctly, sure, they could end up with a good game on their hands, but that's the biggest thing, is Netflix doesn't get it in their own way and say, okay, it's been 3 years, we got to push this thing out there. Think about what Google did with Stadia. They formed these internal studios, then like a year and a half later, they cut it completely. It's not a lot of patience there, and certainly need a lot of patience when it comes to developing, especially these larger games. So here's hoping Netflix getting into this knows what they're getting into, I should say, and they can maybe start to gain some confidence with gamers if they show up with I would even say an average to good game. It doesn't have to, I think, blow anyone away and be a 90 plus on Metacritic, but if they can show a competent release that is fun, I think they can at least get a foot in the door when it comes to gamers and work their way up from there. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today, whether it's Nintendo's Indie World Showcase. Let me know what you think is going to be there, and if you're here after the showcase, let me know what you thought of it. And then also, what about the situation with these games coming out for the PS5 and the Xbox and actually performing better on the PlayStation 5? What's going on there? Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.